Republican Representative Blake Farenthold has been under fire over revelations that back in 2014 he settled a case of sexual harassment for $84,000, which would be bad enough if it was his $84,000. Unfortunately, it was your $84,000 that he used because he sexually harassed someone and got caught. And there he is. You can believe he sexually harassed people. So today, he has released a video talking about what his future in politics will or won't be. And here is an excerpt from that video.
I'd never served in public office before. I had no idea how to run a congressional office. And as a result, I allowed a workplace culture to take root in my office that was too permissive and decidedly unprofessional. It accommodated destructive gossip, offhand comments, off-color jokes, and behavior that in general was less than professional. And I allowed the personal stress of the job to manifest itself in angry outbursts, and too often a failure to treat people with the respect that they deserved. That was wrong. In recent weeks, there's been a renewed focus on the allegations that were made against me by a former employee several years ago. I want to be perfectly clear. The charges that were made are false. In spite of this, I understand fully that this issue has become a political distraction and that I would be forced to engage in a month-long campaign for personal vindication. That's not why I came to Congress. Quite simply, my constituents deserve better. They deserve a primary campaign that's focused on the serious issues facing our country and our state and fixing a broken system. Therefore, I'm announcing my decision not to run for re-election.
So there you saw, initially his apology, I guess, is it an apology? He said he didn't do it, but he was talking about the culture that he created there, which I found to be a sort of flawed way to characterize the situation because it doesn't seem like lots of people were doing bad stuff. It seemed like he was doing bad stuff, but he owned up to some generalities about his behavior and then denied any of the specifics, which is odd, but he is going to be stepping down. He's not going to be running for re-election in 2018. Now, interestingly, he talked about the primary there. Because the deadline to withdraw from the primary race in his congressional district has already expired, his name will likely remain on the ballot during the primary on March 6th, even though he theoretically will not accept it if he still goes on to win. Understand that it's not just that he might have to defend himself theoretically. He's currently under investigation by the House Ethics Committee for sexual harassment towards a former aide, Lauren Greene. That was confirmed by Paul Ryan recently. And there's a number of other incidents that are coming forward. A former coworker of his has specific details, which we can get to. But overall, the interesting thing about this is he apparently believes that either it would be a distraction or that it would turn out that he did what they said he did and he might have to resign. And so he's preemptively coming forward and saying that he won't run again, but he is not stepping down. And so for basically half of his term, he will continue forward as a representative, voting on important bills.
Yeah, so 2 points here that I wanted to make. One is, I love the beginning of that video where he's like, now, I had no idea how to run a congressional office. I mean, I'm a total clown, I didn't know what I was doing. Then why did you ask for people's vote? Okay, that's not really a good excuse. I'm hoping that if you run, you think that you're up to the job. And part of being up to the job is running an office. It's what Trump used to say all the time, like, oh, once I get into the White House, I'll figure everything out. I'll know it so well it'll make your head spin. No, you're supposed to. Yeah, one, how did it work out? Two, you're supposed to know that before you run for office. I don't want you to learn on the job if you're president or you're a member of Congress. So that was a very poor excuse. Second of all, distraction, it'll be a distraction. The world's worst excuse, I hate it. I can't stand it when Democrats do it, I can't stand it when Republicans do it. It's either you're innocent and what, you're gonna step down because other people in your party said it would be a distraction, okay? That's ridiculous. Or no, you did it, shut up and say you did it, and don't pretend that it's just because, people will be slightly distracted. I don't even know what that means. You either did it or you didn't do it. And in your case, it's obvious you did it, you paid the settlement, now you say you're gonna pay it out of finally says, oh, now that you caught me, I was having the taxpayers pay it, but now at a later date I will pay. You did it.
We'll
you
see.
did it. Just say it.
Yeah.
Don't give me this BS about a distraction.
Can we go through a couple of these allegations that are additionally coming out, because I just love the little twist at the end. So Farenthold has also been accused, in addition to the case that we've already talked about, of making sexually inappropriate comments by one of his other former aides, Michael Ricola. Ricola claimed that Farenthold joked prior to Ricola's wedding, "Better have your fiance blow you before she walks down the aisle. It will be the last time." No, don't say that. That's just terrible. He goes on to say, Farenthold joked about whether Ricola's fiance could wear white on her wedding day, depending on if she had had premarital sex. That's fun from your boss. And then furthermore, outside of the sexual stuff, Ricola said this: "Every time he didn't like something, he would call me a fucktard or idiot. He would slam his fist down in rage and explode in anger. He was flying off the handle on every little thing. I couldn't find a way to control it." Now, CNN wanted to confirm or deny this, so they went to Farenthold, and Farenthold denied most of the staffer's claims, but said he did regularly call aides fucktards, but said it was in jest, not out of anger. Oh, okay. It was a lighthearted fucktard.
Yeah, look, we covered this story earlier, and this Michael guy's some new allegations. The more serious allegations are from the women that worked in his office, and they always had to have somebody escort him so that he wouldn't hit on women on the halls of Congress. He apparently particularly liked redheads, I believe, and so look, I happen to, and everybody's got a different thing, different standards and stuff. But you got to be cognizant that you're the boss, right? And so if you wanted to joke around with your friends about what's going to happen after marriage, that's your business, man. Nobody's getting in. Like, I think people sometimes misunderstand these stories. Like, what? I can't say to Bob what's about his fiance or whatever. No, you can say anything you want to Bob as long as you don't. Bob's not reporting into you, right? And can you call your friend Bob a fucktard? Have at it, Hoss. Go nuts. Right?
Yeah, I'd prefer if you don't.
but
I'm
not
old-fashioned, I guess. I don't know.
Not if you're his boss. Now, look, the sexual harassment stuff is why he's gone. But a note on just overall harassment: don't go around the office yelling at everybody. Right? So look, there's disagreements, and sometimes there's just no way around the disagreements. And I know that the passions rise, and it happens in every office, right? But if you're constantly going around yelling at your employees like, you idiot, then you obviously don't know how to manage anyone.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just an absolute failure in management if you're nonstop yelling at everyone. Like, something's obviously gone wrong.
Yeah, and I mean, even to what he said about like admitting basically that he didn't know how to control this thing. He doesn't know how to have people under him, and yet he wants to be a leader of men and women, and he can't control his rage. Like, you can have different reasons for wanting to be a politician, but I think the idea should be that you have your shit together and you think, in fact, I think I know what's going on. I think I could help other people's lives. This dude, he can't even maintain a space 5 to 10 feet around him. And he wants to be responsible for 400,000 plus people. That seems like a bad call.
Yeah, and so, and look, again, I don't, so part of the problem with these stories is that I don't want to be overly judgmental. So if you've lost your temper at work, hey, everybody has. It's not, okay, I get it, right? But if you're the boss and you do it nonstop, that's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot. The fears that we are criminalizing joking, we're criminalizing normal conversation. And yes, there is conversation, like in this case, about some of the things that he said, off-color jokes and things like that. But in this particular case, he's not resigning because of that. And so far as I know, and I haven't tracked every single one of these, I don't think any of these people in politics or media or any of these areas are stepping down and losing their careers because of off-color jokes and comments. That is the frosting on the cake of abuse and harassment. That's not what people are losing their jobs for. They're losing their jobs because they're sexually assaulting people generally. So you can have those fears, and we should have that conversation as a society, but let's not imply that people's lives are being ruined because they made a joke.
You just watched a video by the Young Turks, home of the revolution. If you'd like to get a lot more than that, get the full show by becoming a member. tytnetwork.com/join.